everybody knows, we are recordings in progress. We are recording the sessions. What happens is everyone signs up, and what we're finding is that Wednesday afternoons in particular clash with a lot of schools, staff meetings and things like that. So if you ever want to, or if you think you missed something while you are in attendance, or if there are any of the weekly sessions that you can't get to, we will always record the sessions and we will send them out to everybody who has signed up, so that you've got access to it. And it will also be available on our YouTube channels. I'm really sorry about my presentation. For some reason today, my husband decided to move our desk in our office to a completely different location, and the light's not flattering at all. So the desk will be moving back tomorrow. So if you can't see me very clearly, I apologize for that. So today's session is all about heritage partners and heritage centres in different host cities, and we are being joined by Amanda Phillips from Leeds Art Gallery, who I'm going to hand you over to shortly. But you will also see that Esther, who is our heritage lead for the World Reimagined, is also here, and later on I'm going to hand over to her so that she can tell you all about her role, her experience, what her part of the project is going to be, how you'll be able to engage with that at a slightly later stage once the education programme kicks off. And this session is all about giving you lots of information about how we can extend learning away from the classroom and our main education resources that we're providing you with, and how you can get yourselves and your children and students involved in all of the sort of cultural and heritage activities available to you in your host cities, but also so that you understand them and what they mean with regards to colonialism and heritage and empire and all of those sorts of things. Because I think I'm an English specialist by trade. I'm not an artist or anything like that, but I do enjoy cultural experiences. And when I go to galleries and museums, it's really easy to just accept that everything that's being presented to you, you know, has been vetted or is well respected or has got good intentions. But historically, that's not always the case. And both Amanda and Esther are going to be here today to talk us through that and how we can explore that and teach our children about it, and how we can make improvements in our heritage centres, so that we can unite all together, okay? So I'm gonna hand over to Amanda first, if that's okay, Esther. And Amanda, you've got permissions to share. So if you want to take over the screen, introduce yourself and let everyone know all about you and where you're from and who you are, it's over to you.
Okay, so hello everybody, and there's a few people here that I recognise, especially hello to you over Zoom world. So what I'm going to do is, once I've wrestled my PowerPoint into some kind of friendliness, you know what it's like, it always takes forever. There we go, hopefully that's as I want it. So Leeds Art Gallery, as many galleries and museums in England and wider, offers opportunities to think about, talk about, and make, inspired by notions of racial justice and the important questions of our time, and included actually all time. So what I'm going to share with you is a PowerPoint, which is partly something, or I've reused parts of it, of something that I used yesterday or the day before for a portraits virtual workshop for a primary school. So some of the ideas and questions that I was trying to provoke in the classroom in a positive sense of provocation will be active in the images that I share with you through Who'd Have Thought PowerPoint. Some of these images belong to the artists, so the copyright rests with them. So if anybody does save the recording, please could you be mindful not to turn it into a tea towel or anything like that, because I'll be in trouble. So this is Leeds Art Gallery. It was built in 1888. It was built to celebrate Queen Victoria's 50 years on the throne. It's a civic art gallery, purpose-built building. Once the building had been constructed, they didn't have any money really left to buy any artworks, although that has changed. So many of the early days artworks came from the industrialists and their mindset, the people that helped build the art gallery to be, as they said, or as was said, to be the Elysian fields, to contrast with Dante's Inferno, which is quite difficult to unpick. I think you have to go back to Victorian ideas and ideologies to understand what they wanted to do through it. I think minimally, they wanted to do two things. They wanted it to be a place for well-being, but also a place where they could train the right kind of workers with aesthetic skills who could be effective in the factories that were in the city centre and connected to the woolen industry. I guess the early artworks are very much of the colonial histories of Victorian Britain at the time. Interestingly, around about 1912, they decided that they were going to collect British art. What's interesting now is ideas of Britishness have changed. So the collection is richer in its diversity of identities in the more contemporary aspects of the collection as opposed to that at its beginnings. So to start off with, Postcard Flag by Tony Cragg. An artwork made up of broken plastic bits in blue and red. Some are recognizable when you see it up close. It's huge. When I first started working here, this artwork was frequently talked about when I'm doing my B&A art detective activities with kids or anybody else in schools, outside of schools, within communities. People would frequently tell me that this artwork's about Britishness. Some at the time would have gone on to use, or did go on to use, the words such as imperialism and colonialism. But times have changed. Nowadays, when this artwork is on display, most people will tell me it's about the environment, climate change, and saving the planet. It's really interesting how the meanings in artworks can shift according to time and place. At one point, I thought this artwork would start to be understood in terms of British values, but that never happened. So, Britishness. What is that? What does it mean? Who identifies Britishness? And who of us identify ourselves with that word? This is a different artwork by Richard Long. It's called Dullabol Stone Circle, and it's a way of representing a sense of place through the materials connected to the place. So in this artwork, he drew a circle on a map in Cornwall. He walked that walk as the map indicated, and then looked about him and used the materials of that location to make a sculpture. In this case, it's Dullabol slate from Dullabol. Leeds by Norman Ackroyd. Is this a Leeds that you identify with? Or perhaps it's this one by John Atkinson Grimshaw, 19th century artist, firmly in the mindset and heart of many Leeds residents. Or perhaps it's this version. My mind's gone, Lucy. This is by Lucy, if only I could remember her second name. Or perhaps it's this by Annalise Stuber. My version of Leeds is in the countryside that surrounds it. So a sense of place can be different, but is quite often a really important aspect of identity. Picturing yourself. Leeds Art Gallery provides opportunities, as many other galleries and museums do, for thinking about who you are, how you want to be represented. I start with this image, a self-portrait of Millie Childress. I'm very fond of it. Millie Childress was working in the 19th century, unusually as a woman artist. She dresses herself in a red smock, extremely standing out in this canvas. These are my work uniform, in my opinion anyway, holding the tools of her trade, her palette with paint blobs on it and brushes in her hand. The tilt of her head, the way she unusually looks outside of the canvas at us, the viewer, is saying something really important. I see it as a challenge saying, don't you dare not think of me as an artist. Here I am. There's another form of self-portrait. In this case, it's Mark Gertler. Or here's one. This is Bruce McLean. On a shelf above his head, it's a still from a film. It's a crown. Provocatively, the film saying, I want my crown, and there is a very strong soundtrack that says that, is shown in the gallery. What does that say? What is that saying about him as an artist, about his perception of self and what he needs and where he can get it? By inference, he's arguing that the institution can give him his crown, and perhaps the crown means wealth or confidence or perhaps a sense of self. An entirely different portrait, not necessarily a self-portrait, but I think you read it as such. This is by Paula Rego. It's called An Artist in Her Studio. Perhaps, I don't know for sure, the artist is the person in the middle, the person wearing a purple top, a red skirt, smoking a pipe, sitting in a way that would commonly be understood, but my mum would definitely say it, commonly understood as unladylike. For me, there's a challenge in this artwork also. So Leeds Art Gallery not only can help you talk through what you might like yourself to be understood as and how, but it can also be useful for thinking about how people have been pictured. And many of the artworks that I will show you now are artworks that can open up conversation about racial justice or injustice, sorry. Oriental Pastimes by Frank Dixie. Victorian artwork set in what I would say is North Africa, maybe Algeria, maybe Morocco. Very satisfying to look at in many ways. But the appropriation of clothing and other items, the exoticization of people in a domestic environment to be looked at. And I've worked with this with young people. I don't think you necessarily need to dive in at the deep end, but they very quickly ask questions and answer them themselves, which helps with a decolonizing strategy. This is by Walter Sickert. The title is all about black. It doesn't say anything else. It's just about the color. It's not about the person, the identity, what's happening, how the person got to be pictured by the artist. Equally here, by Jacob Cramer, it's called The Japanese Girl, reduced to shapes and colours. Her identity is unknown. She's a cipher for a particular country, a country represented in a very particular way. Or this one, the Tamil Water Carriers by Hornell, where somehow there is an equivalence between the shape and colour of faces and the vessels that they're carrying. Or Molita by Ronald Dunlop. We know nothing about the sitter. We know very little about the artist. Behind me is a wall of portraits, and Molita features really prominently. And in the different versions of this wall of portrait, she's there to help us talk about the missing narratives and histories within the collection and in our perceptions of who's pictured and how they're pictured and why. By Jade Montserrat, this extraordinary portrait, which exists in your mind's eye or your imagination, somebody who is both savage and elegant, opens up different kinds of debates and questions and ideas. Whisper the Waves, the Wind by Susan Lacey is yet another, I would call that paying attention to the detail of things. It's a performance work which emerges in the gallery recently. It is an old work from the 90s, but recently it was displayed on a small monitor with a series of photographs. It's a performance artwork where the artist invited a number of older ladies to promenade on a beach and then sit at mic'd tables where they talked about aging and perceptions of age. You can see both the visuals and you can hear their voices as they share their personal experiences and challenge perceptions. So just a little of digging into this question. All of these artworks are described as picturing peasants. The relationships between people, the activities that they're doing, position the individuals and their lifestyles in a very particular way that perhaps isn't sensitive to the lived experience. Here, notions of class. In one by Ken Curry in the City Bar, another important mischief. Here, representations of age. Jacob Cramer's Oh Lord, Hear Our Prayer on one side, and Val Robinson's Mother Courage on the other. Here's quite an interesting juxtaposition. The artwork with the blue background was commissioned to dig into, to deconstruct the artwork behind it, the one on the left. So this is The Death of General Gordon by William Joy, where power and agency is represented with the white hero at the top of the artwork, resigned to a violent death. Bob and Roberta Smith riffing off some of the visual imagery. The red bucket on the top connects to the fez that General Gordon is wearing. This is General Gordon, and reading the text around it and using the radio, a mode of mass communication, an old radio at the bottom, starts to talk about, or provides an opportunity to talk about, how we get ideas of events, how history is represented, and what is said about people and why. So there are a number of artworks, particularly in the collection at Leeds, towards the more younger ones, that open up different ways of thinking and approaching this idea of identity and difference and heritage. Jacob Cramer, as I mentioned previously, in an artwork that, when it was first brought to the collection in Leeds, was heavily debated for its reference to the Jewish communities in Leeds at the time, and was unwelcome. But happily, once an artwork enters the collection that belongs to the people of Leeds, it cannot be removed. So the artwork now presents a really interesting opportunity to not only address that story, but also talk about Jewish identity and Jewish practices. This is Karen Babian. She's of Armenian cultural heritage. This artwork on the left draws really heavily on the illuminated manuscripts that are part of her life story. And in fact, she frequently, especially in the past, used this kind of imagery to address the genocide of the Armenian peoples in the early 20th century, a genocide that she says is not acknowledged as much as some others are. Simon Fujiwara, born in London, but of Japanese cultural heritage, makes an artwork called Rebecca that draws on really interesting other cultural references. Many people will talk about the army of terracotta soldiers. This is Leslie Sanderson. Her artwork Negative, it's quite sizable. It references, in my opinion, photo booth photographs and the way in which photo booth photographs are used in passports to fix identity. This is an early 1990s artwork. She, I think, in this artwork is exploring how her identity is fixed in her English sounding name, Leslie Sanderson, but her histories and heritages are different to that. Of particular interest to me, at least, is the way in which she represents her body, which within her originating cultural location, to reveal yourself in a bikini would have been seen as inappropriate. Anish Kapoor, his artwork Voidstone, an artwork that I believe draws strongly on his faith and the seeming bringing together and the potency of opposites. Jade Montserrat, living and working in Scarborough, engaging significantly with notions of her identity and rights and justice. Martine Sims, artwork that recently entered into the collection. It's a film work shown on 2 television screens. The 2 television screens are talking about Black identity as represented in American soap operas and how that constructs a sense of self. Harold Offey, recently shown at Leeds Art Gallery and now in the collection, Reading the Realness, which is a series of television scripts focusing on significant events in our current lives. You could, for example, read, this could be an event such as war in Ukraine, but he locates it within television programs such as Question Time or Jeremy Vine, where these political events and ideas that we draw from it as watching them as everyday people start to construct our belief systems. Labena Himid. This artwork is on loan from Griselda Pollock. It's two Black lesbian women discussing something really important. A hand is raised, stop. One hand, finger extended, is pointing towards Africa. If you look closely, the bowl in the middle has a dotted line. On the plate on the other side of the table is what kids have told me is corn and bacon, but with a little time, they will equally tell me is stars and stripes. It's an artwork saying very clearly, stop slavery. Labena was very clear when I was able to talk to her briefly about this, that this is an artwork that she's only ever done once, and that slavery is not something from the past. It is current in our lives today. So Leeds Art Gallery can offer these to schools, whether it's exploring people and our perceptions of them, whether it's celebrating individuality in histories, or diving straight in to consider questions around racial justice. But equally, we can explore for those people who are participating in the Globe project, we can explore together with a class ways of using creativity to imagine and reimagine, and also the various different ways in which you could use materials to decorate a globe to say something. We can offer virtual art gallery visits using the glories of Teams or Zoom, visits in person, and there are strands of delivery, which is exploring, looking at artworks and speaking and listening, making, asking difficult questions and undertaking perhaps unusual tasks in challenge, or spending time in dwell with exploring things with sensitivity to develop self-belief and confidence and identities. We're also here for you guys or anybody that you know. Just give us a ring, send us an email, and we'll support. And with some experience and some friends in the room, we can together offer ideas of artists, artworks, and perhaps locations for globes. So I will stop screen sharing. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Amanda. It's like really, really helpful to hear about all of those wonderful bits of art and just our ways of thinking about, you know, experiencing art and what it actually means, the messages that are being delivered to us, and, you know, just encouraging young people to be critical thinkers so that whatever is presented to them, they don't just accept its face value, that they ask questions and they're full of intrigue and they want to explore and really understand what messages are being sort of delivered to them through these sort of cultural experiences. So thank you very much. I'm going to hand over to Esther in just a second, but just so I don't miss anyone, is there anyone who's got any particular questions for Amanda right now? You can put it in the chat, you can unmute yourself if you've got a quick question. Okay, that's fine. So there will be a little bit of time towards the end to, if you think of anything. Apologies, I've got 4 children in the background. Just trying to
love me.
Working from home life. And yes, if you do think of anything, stick it in the chat, or there'll be another opportunity later. So I'm going to hand over now to our heritage lead, Esther, and I'm going to put myself on mute so you can't hear my children in the background.
Hi everybody, lovely to be here with you all. So it was really great to hear all of Amanda's discussions about items within the collection that provoke conversations, and obviously in the school setting it's really important to collect and contextualize that in an age appropriate way. With the heritage programme for the World Reimagined, we're working with various heritage partners across each of the host cities, as well as heritage partners beyond that, to tell these stories about the complex histories that date all the way back to Mother Africa, all the way up to reimagining the future. So not just a story of abolition and emancipation, but really exploring sort of those roots and those histories and how those stories are told. So the idea with our online collection, and those of you who have signed up to the programme and signed up to the newsletter will find out when we launch the online heritage collection as well. So that will give you additional resources and additional pieces of information to tap into, and additional stories to help enrich your learning conversations with your students. And so as with the art gallery, it's about bringing those stories to the forefront that might not have been heard before. So for example, one of our colleagues talks consistently about when he was at school, the only thing he learnt about abolition and slavery was that Wilberforce ended it. I sit and I listen to that, and I wasn't so lucky. I went to a pretty good school, I think, and I didn't learn about abolition and emancipation. And it's really important to us as part of this programme that we are telling that whole and complete story, and that people recognise that this isn't Black history, it's British history. And art gallery is a really great way of exploring how these institutions were set up. These are British institutions, and yet the collections don't necessarily, in terms of what they have within them, particularly at the time they're set up, represent everyone who's in Britain at the time. And so having those conversations around what are those gaps in those stories, how galleries are now addressing those gaps, are really interesting conversations that can be had at different levels within school, and that's something that we really want to encourage with people exploring these trails. It's a really amazing opportunity, both because this is going to be something that's in the public sphere for people to go away and take away conversations, have thoughts and bring those back to you, but it's also an opportunity for you as schools to bring that learning into your classrooms as well. So having that opportunity to have those diverse stories and those diverse histories and those conversations about what there is within your city, I think it's going to be really exciting as part of this programme. We've mentioned as well that we've got the communities programme, and so there's further opportunities for people to access activities that will be happening within all of these within heritage institutions during the run of the tour, and opportunities for grants within the community for people to access those funds. But in terms of learning for schools, I think this is a really great opportunity. I keep saying the word opportunity, apologies, I am more articulate than that normally. I think this is an occasion that we could all rise to, in terms of however your schools and classes are engaged with the programme, being able to see themselves as a culture and see other aspects of history being explored. So I'm going to hand back to Sabrina. I know that she's given you a timeline of events and activities that are happening, and also allow you guys the opportunity to come up with any questions that you have, either about the heritage programme or general aspects of the World Reimagined.
Did you talk about, sorry, my children were distracting me. Did you talk about your portal and what they'd be able to access once it's ready?
So thank you. With the portal, the aim is to have at least 100 stories per city, in terms of about 300 words long, and they will relate and link into stories within each of the host cities. And so that portal will be accessed by vague air quotes, digital solution, probably some kind of QR code as people go around. But as it's posted on the internet, you guys can have links as well to all of that information. And so that will have geotagging within it. So if, for example, there is a story within the collection about some of the statues in the city and some of the people represented in that, either abolitionists or people who owned enslaved people, then there's an opportunity there. Every time I say that, I feel like I need to, yeah, apologies. But yes, those geotags, so you'll be able to see globes that are local to you, items and highlights of history that are around you in your local area within those host cities as well. So yes, and in terms of, you know, not just, you know, the standard people we've mentioned Will before, but also speakers who might have come to the city. So people like Frederick Douglass and Marcus Roper, people who are sometimes termed runaways, and I'm starting to term self-liberators. So people who had formerly been enslaved and had tried to get themselves out of slavery, acts of resistance that happened both in the UK and in other parts of the world. So getting that real depth of learning embedded into the programme to be used alongside imagery that you see to be able to challenge in the art gallery. So that image of an uprising as, again, this high located figure within the artwork with all of the people of colour being low down and in aggressive stance. You want to challenge that narrative when you can look at a history from a first person perspective of people who were, you know, downtrodden and beaten down, and how they finally kind of risen up in celebration and in an act of true defiance. And again, if you want to draw parallels to things that are happening in society now, the idea of how are people portrayed when they are victims of an aggressor, or you know, people who are trying to seek out betterment and who have been invited into our country. So again, not just stories that go back into the 18th and 19th century, but contemporary stories as well.
Thank you, Esther. It's a really beautiful online portal that is going to be available. We've had a sneak preview of, you know, what it's going to look like, and, you know, it's just amazing how technology can be used to, you know, make these links, and for you to have a really personalized experience city by city to really understand the heritage and engage with different parts of the culture and history of your cities that you might not necessarily have known about. We're living in an age where we're walking down streets that are named after people who are connected really deeply to slavery, where we've still got statues in our communities and we don't fully understand the history behind them. And so engaging with the heritage programme in that way can really support and extend your learning beyond the classroom. Esther's also a brilliant specialist with regards to sort of culture and heritage anyway. And so she will also be working with our community coordinators and making them aware whether there are any city-based sort of leads and experiences that are taking place as the learning programme and as the programme, the World Reimagined programme overall sort of starts and goes on. So we will try to
also they're feeding into me as well, because they are based within your community. So absolutely. Whereas I'm working across all of the different cities, the community coordinators have that real local knowledge about people within your communities that can be almost community, not even almost, community historians who know the history of your city and some of those bits of history that they can fill me in on, but also that we can spread to other areas of the country so people can see, learning from things like the Statues project that's going on at the moment with yourselves, and people who are doing similar things, because it isn't just the history of each individual city, it is a conversation that we need to have as a country.
Yeah, it's a nationwide thing, and it's about our British culture, identity, our shared history, and hopefully when we complete the programme, we are able to have a better understanding of who we all are, how we came to be here, and to really create a legacy, a long-lasting legacy about understanding of cultural identity and celebrating differences as well. So I'm aware of the time and that you've had quite a few people giving you lots of information, really useful information that I hope you have found useful and has given you a better idea of how you can engage with different things beyond the learning resources that we're providing ourselves. If you do want to reach out, I appreciate some of you might not be Leeds based. I know our main speaker today was based in Leeds, but we are making links with lots of heritage and cultural centres in each city who are being really generous in their support and opening up opportunities for schools to engage with them, to go on visits, to explore anything that's related or comes under the umbrella of racial identity and all of those sorts of things. And so what we will do is we will put you in touch with any relevant parties in your city so that you can engage with them and make sure that you get the best out of the programme. Does anybody have any questions? Or Esther, did you have something else to add?
And just to speak to that, because we're working nationally, you know, there are places like Black Cultural Archives in London, you've got the Slavery Museum in Liverpool. I'm not going to talk exhaustively about all of the different partners, but in terms of that sort of thinking about, you know, if there might not be something that's specifically in your city, there might be something in another city that still talks to some of the illustrative things you want to pull out, so we can talk to things that exist within other collections as well, because it might be that the only reason it's not there is because the International Slavery Museum has got it in their collection and it's no longer in your city, but there are still links to it. So just to connect you up with some of the other places and projects that have been happening around, and projects that have been happening sort of historically within your city and within other cities as well, because sometimes projects happen and then nothing happens with them for a while and people forget that actually that work's been done. So to kind of bring things back to light, I think is a really interesting way of engaging with things anew.
And I'd just like to throw in, as in one of these heritage centres, is COVIDitis has made us all very good at virtual art gallery engagement or virtual engagement. So in some ways it provides an opportunity that you can visit anywhere where you can find something that might be useful to the teaching. I think it's going to be a challenge for the World Reimagined to make a network and make that visible, because I think it's quite an exciting opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely.
I can reshare the timeline so that everyone knows when different things are happening with regards to the programme, and as and when we hear or have got information about any sort of live dates or events, we will also be sharing that with everyone in our networks. And please feel free to share that information amongst your extended networks. I also want to just remind everyone, I know most people are already signed up to the programme, but if you've got extended networks or connections to schools, colleges, sixth forms, alternative provisions, etc., the final deadline for signing up to the Globe programme is Friday the 25th of March. So there's still time for people to buy into the programme and to be a part of this. It would be fantastic to have as many schools in each of the host cities connected and involved and engaged in the programme, because it means that you can also network amongst each other, share ideas and you know, create sort of community networks and bonds and work together, and that will create a really longer lasting legacy in each city, and that's what we're really hoping for overall. So does anyone have any other questions? No. Well, I'd like to thank you all for your time. Thank you to our guest speakers, Amanda and Esther, and I appreciate you all being here. There will be a recording of this, so if anyone's missed anything, or if you want to just go back over anything that we've discussed or have a look at anything that we've discussed, then please feel free to do so, and we will send that link out tomorrow morning once it's been downloaded from the cloud. Have a good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you all for being here. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.